Superomedial wall of suboccipital triangle is formed by which of the following given structures? This question is about the boundaries of suboccipital triangle. So, this triangle is situated in the suboccipital region in the back of neck. Suboccipital region situated in the back of neck. Now, let's try to visualize the suboccipital region. So, this extends from the external occipital protuberance of the occipital bone. The most prominent point, it is the external occipital protuberance. From there up to the posterior aspect of C1 and C2 vertebrae. C2 is known as the axis vertebrae and C1 is known as the atlas vertebrae. Therefore, from the level of external occipital protuberance up to the level of the axis vertebrae is a suboccipital region. So, this picture shows C7 vertebrae. So, if we trace from C7, we will be able to make out the other cervical vertebra up to C1. Therefore, from external occipital protuberance up to this C2 level is known as the suboccipital region, and this region is occupied by important muscles of the neck, of which the most important ones are the suboccipital muscles. There are 4 suboccipital muscles situated deep within the suboccipital region, and the space enclosed by these 4 suboccipital muscles is known as the suboccipital triangle. And what are those 4 suboccipital muscles? This picture itself shows that also. Rectus capitis posterior minor, rectus capitis posterior major, and obliquus capitis superior and obliquus capitis inferior. So, these are the 4 suboccipital muscles. Just you have to remember 2 important terms, rectus capitis posterior, which includes major and minor, and obliquus capitis, which includes superior and inferior group of muscles. And now, getting on with suboccipital triangle. So, I have stated that it is the space enclosed by the 4 suboccipital muscles. So, this is the space. This is the triangular space which is enclosed by the suboccipital muscles on all the sides. And now, how to get into the suboccipital region? First and foremost, we have this layer of skin. So, on exposing that, on reflecting that, comes the superficial fascia, and next to it comes the muscle layer formed by trapezius, and deep to trapezius we have the splenius capitis muscle, which is shown here, the splenius capitis. On reflecting that, we have semispinalis capitis on the medial aspect, and we have the longissimus capitis on the lateral aspect. These 2 muscles are also demonstrated here, semispinalis capitis and longissimus capitis on the lateral aspect. On reflecting these 2 muscles, we enter into the suboccipital muscles. Okay, the 4 suboccipital muscles enclosing the suboccipital triangle is present deep to these layers. And if you look into this picture, the triangle is bounded medially by rectus capitis posterior minor and rectus capitis posterior major. Okay, you can see rectus capitis posterior major. This is rectus capitis posterior minor. So, we can make out that the minor is situated more towards the midline. So, MI stands for the MI of midline. Whereas the remaining 2 muscles, that is the obliquus capitis superior, so this is situated on the lateral aspect of the triangle and also on the superior aspect. Lateral as well as on the superior aspect. Similarly, rectus capitis muscles are also present on the superior aspect, medial and superior aspect. Okay, so in this picture, this is the midline. Okay, so this is the midline. So, this picture is showing the right side suboccipital region. And then we have one more muscle, that is the obliquus capitis inferior. So, this obliquus capitis inferior, it is situated on the inferior aspect of the triangle. Okay, so inferior forms the inferior boundary of the triangle, whereas the superior oblique muscles, obliquus capitis superior, forms the superolateral boundary, whereas on the medial as well as superior, that is superomedially, we have rectus capitis posterior major and rectus capitis posterior minor muscles. And if we look into the contents, that is within the suboccipital triangle, if you observe, we have the vertebral artery and also we have posterior ramus of C1. Okay, so vertebral artery, to be more specific, it is the third part of vertebral artery that is present or passing through the suboccipital triangle, and posterior ramus of C1. But apart from that, we also have suboccipital venous plexus. So these are the contents of suboccipital triangle. Therefore, it is formed by one artery, one nerve and one venous plexus. All these three forms the content of posterior triangle. And apart from that, look into this picture. So this is mainly to observe the floor of suboccipital triangles. Floor is formed by two posterior structures. They are the posterior arch of atlas. Okay, so here you can make out the posterior arch of atlas, and apart from that, we have one another posterior structure which is nothing but a membrane. So here you can see some green color membrane, okay, running in the suboccipital triangle. Okay, the suboccipital triangle boundary is nothing but this. Okay, so this is the suboccipital triangle in this picture. Okay, the floor is formed by posterior arch of atlas as well as the posterior atlanto-occipital membrane. Posterior atlanto-occipital membrane. So these two posterior structures forms the floor of the suboccipital triangle. Okay, so these are the different boundaries of suboccipital triangle, including the floor and the important contents which I have stated in the previous picture. Okay, so now getting back to our question, now we are very familiar about the boundaries of suboccipital triangle. So let's recollect once. Superomedially, we have the rectus capitis posterior muscles, and superolaterally we have the superior oblique muscle, and inferiorly it is formed by inferior oblique muscle. Since it is a triangle, so you have one superomedial, superolateral and one inferior border, and then comes the floor of suboccipital triangle. So it is formed by posterior arch of atlas as well as the posterior atlanto-occipital membrane. And then getting on with the contents, includes one artery, that is the vertebral artery. More specifically, it is the third part of vertebral artery, and we have one nerve, that is the dorsal ramus or posterior ramus of C1 nerve. And then we have one venous plexus, that is nothing but the suboccipital venous plexus. So these are the contents of the suboccipital triangle. So now look into the question. We have to choose or identify the superomedial wall. First option says anterior arch of atlas. Anterior arch of atlas is not within the suboccipital region, because suboccipital region includes the posterior aspect of the atlas and axis vertebra, not the anterior. We can exclude option 1. Option 2 says posterior arch of atlas, so it is forming the floor of the suboccipital triangle, not the medial wall. And superior oblique muscle, it forms the superolateral wall and not superomedial wall, whereas rectus capitis muscle, both major as well as rectus capitis posterior minor, forms the superior as well as the medial wall. Therefore, superomedial wall of suboccipital triangle is formed by rectus capitis muscle. Therefore, option 4 is the right answer here.